Why will regulated militia be necessary to the security of a free state? The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Welcome to another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. My name is Cam Edwards. It is great to have you with us today. Talking about a city that doesn't recognize our right to keep and bear arms for the most part, New York City. And what's going on in the Big Apple there, where the gun control laws are failing, violent crime is up, and the city getting ready to cut $1 billion from the New York Police Department budget. We're going to talk with Rob O'Donnell, former New York police officer, about that and more coming up in just a matter of moments. Before we do that, however, got an announcement for you from President Trump, a huge announcement for his top supporters. We'll be celebrating the 2020 Republican National Convention this summer, and President Trump wants you to enter for your chance to join him at the convention. If you win, the team will cover the flight, hotel, give you VIP passes for yourself and a guest. All you have to do is text ENGAGE to 88022 today for your chance to meet President Trump at the convention. Again, that is ENGAGE, ENGAGE, to 88022 to enter to win this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to be President Trump's special guest, paid for by Donald J. Trump for President Incorporated. Now let's turn our attention to what's going on in the Big Apple of New York City. A couple of headlines to give you. First, from CBS in New York, Mayor Bill de Blasio, council speaker, facing a midnight deadline to cut $1 billion from the New York Police Department budget. According to CBS 2, this is going to result in several changes to the New York Police Department. Is going to reduce the size of the police force from 36,000 down to about 34,000 through attrition, which, by the way, they might already be pretty close to that number. Also going to cancel the July police class of 1,100 cadets. They're going to move homeless outreach out of the purview of the New York Police Department. They're going to reduce the capital budget to provide funds for the New York Housing Authority as well as recreation centers. They're going to move school safety to the Department of Education in stages. So this is a combination of defunding the police, moving some services around, but also, most dramatically, reducing the number of officers on the streets of New York. And that comes at a time in which NBC in New York is reporting that shootings in the city are up more than 127% compared to the same week in 2019. And by the way, they've been writing these headlines for several weeks now because crime has been soaring. In fact, you go back to January and crime was already up compared to where it was in January of 2019. But now it's simply exploded. So it doesn't seem like the wisest of moves to reduce policing at a time in which violent crime is on the upswing. It's one of the reasons why I wanted to sit down and talk with Rob O'Donnell, who used to work for the New York Police Department for decades and decades, about the moves that he is seeing the city making and what the repercussions might be. Take a look and a listen. Rob, thank you so much, sir, for coming on the program. It's good talking with you today.
Thanks for having me, Cam.
Yeah, you bet. So Mayor Bill de Blasio and the New York City Council, they've got some big decisions to make. They're vowing to cut $1 billion from the New York Police Department budget. Apparently, they've got to do this by midnight tonight, Rob. What are you hearing about where these cuts are going to take place, and what would it mean to shrink the NYPD budget by $1 billion each year?
Well, $1 billion from the New York City budget is 1/6 the budget of the New York City Police Department. So, think about your regular household budget. If someone took your household budget and reduced it by 1/6%, where would that leave your household? And think of that citywide for public safety in a city such as New York City. It's just devastating. It's short-sighted, and it's hashtag justice.
Yeah. And this is happening at the same time that crime is shooting up in New York City. I'm looking at a headline here from NBC New York. Weekly NYC shootings soar 127% compared with the same time period in 2019, from 26 last year to 59 in the last week in New York City. At least 5 shooting incidents since Sunday night, including 1 fatality. Crime's going the wrong way, and New York City's politicians seem to be saying, well, while crime's going up, the police are going to disappear.
Yeah, this is what happens when you listen to whoever screams the loudest and not best practices and what's worked for decades in New York City. The disbanding of the anti-crime units from the police who carried 90% of the weight as far as proactive policing, taking guns and getting these offenders off the streets. was devastating to New York. And just the constant rhetoric from the mayor's office to lack of support from police leadership is just magnifying what's to be known over the past few years as the Ferguson effect in these cities, not just New York, but nationwide.
You know, when you see the reaction from the city and you see the demand from activists, again, to defund police, you know, you and I have talked about this before, Rob. I mean, New York City is one of those places in the United States where the Second Amendment is not a right. It is an absolute privilege. You know, to me, one of the big takeaways over the past couple of weeks is New York City's gun control laws simply aren't that effective. If criminals want to commit these violent crimes, they are empowered at the moment to do so. Meanwhile, you know, law-abiding citizens, somebody who applied for a premises license just to keep a handgun in their home, you know, back in March or April, they're probably not going to get approved, if they get approved, until January of next year. I know that it's not going to happen, but is it time for New York City to revisit its gun laws to recognize the right of the people to keep and bear arms in self-defense while crime is soaring and police resources are drying up?
It shouldn't take something like this for that to happen regardless, but I don't see that happening. Leadership New York has, especially with the city council and the mayor, as radical as they've been. You know, concealed carry permits and even premise permits in New York City are basically non-existent unless you know somebody or you have the financial benefits to push yourself through that system. For the everyday system, you know just as well as I do that the Second Amendment is frowned upon and not supported in a city like New York.
Yeah, you're right. And you know, again, it's a pipe dream. I know that it's not going to happen. I wish that it would. I think, and you're right, it shouldn't take something like this to affect a change. Instead, you know, though, we're seeing change go the other way. The citizen's still going to be disarmed, the criminal's going to be empowered, and the police are going to be, cut off at the knees, it sounds like, from the city. What do you think the short-term effects are going to be here? We'll talk about the long-term effects in just a moment, but are criminals feeling, I mean, they have to be feeling emboldened right now in New York.
Well, just to touch on the Second Amendment, what New York City is asking for by the actions they're taking is a Bernie gets Part 2. You're going to have everyday, normally law-abiding citizens who are just terrified to take the subway system, to walk down the street because of the crime that has skyrocketed. And, you know, they're going to look at it, well, if these illegal criminals are carrying guns and such to commit their crimes, why shouldn't I carry a gun, be it illegal or not, to protect myself and my family? That's what the city's going towards, because, you know, your everyday citizens are fearful in New York City now, and it's growing.
Well, you know, and this is why I'm sorry, I just want to interrupt, but I mean, this is one of the reasons why I've been talking a lot about how gun control laws create gun crime. In New York City is a perfect example of this. You know, in most states, you don't have to have a license to own a gun in your home. In most states, if you meet the statutory requirements for a concealed carry license, you get your concealed carry license. And in more than a dozen states, if you can legally own a gun, you can legally carry it, no license required. In New York City, it's entirely different, right? And as you say, if people cannot legally acquire a firearm for self-defense, and yet they feel like their life is in danger every time they set foot outside of their home, that is going to spur some people who, as you say, are otherwise law-abiding citizens to break the law, to carry a gun. Better to be judged by 12 than carried by 6. And again, if New York would simply recognize the Second Amendment, that issue would go away. But these gun control laws are actually inflating crime in New York City, and I think, frankly, making the distrust between the police and the communities that they serve even worse, because now you've got police officers that are tasked with enforcing, you know, these nonviolent possessory offenses that could put people in prison for years simply for protecting themselves.
Yeah, it's no doubt a perfect storm in a city like New York, where, again, the Second Amendment is frowned upon and fought against at every angle by city government in a city such as that. And it's a shame. You know, if people in New York City were allowed to protect themselves and were allowed to practice their Second Amendment, you know, there would be less crime. You know, the police are a phone call away, but that phone call is sometimes, you know, 2, 3, 5, 8 minutes away. When your life's in danger, you don't have that time. And it's high time that cities like New York realize why the Second Amendment exists and why it should be practiced.
So how bad do you think it's going to get in New York? Are we on the road back to the bad old days of the 1990s?
Yeah, no doubt. From what I'm seeing and speaking to the officers on the ground, it's deteriorating faster than it ever has. In my 30 years in public safety, my time in the police department, over the past month alone, I have never seen law enforcement, not even in New York, just nationally, deteriorate based on false rhetoric so rapidly, and it's scary. It's scaring law enforcement professionals. How it's not terrifying the public is beyond me.
Well, it may very well be terrifying members of the public, but I don't know how comfortable New Yorkers might feel about speaking out about this right now, right? I mean, if you say the wrong thing, you take the wrong side, you could lose your job, you could lose your livelihood, you could be deplatformed and unpersoned.
It is, and they're attacked outright. As long as you speak their line and say what they want to hear, you're fine. But the second you support the police, the second you support law and order, not just the police, you're going to be attacked. They're going to go after your job. They're going to go after your family, and such like that. It's terrifying that the city I loved and changed. I was part of the change in New York City that took back, 42nd Street and Times Square from the dregs of society to a main tourist, a national worldwide tourist attraction. To see the deterioration in the city that I loved and was born and raised in is just disheartening, to say the least. And again, 1/6 of the police department budget, and a lot of it is the shell game or 3-card Monte that these politicians are doing. They're going to move the traffic safety division back to the Department of Transportation. They're going to move school resources, school safety back to the Department of Education. That's the way it was through the 60s, 70s, and 80s, until, Rudy Giuliani merged them all to streamline. All this is going to do is cost more money in the end. They're talking about taking more money from the police department and putting towards social, practices like social workers and housing and such like that. Well, this is just your typical shell game where they're going to move the card. As you're watching, they're manipulating the sleep on the police movement that's going on. They're going to take this money from the police department. They're going to increase these social services, but they're going to realize real quick that they have to fund the police again because it's just getting too bad. They're not going to take that money away from these social. They're just going to increase taxes to increase the police, the money they've taken from the police. So all this is all the projects and all the theories that they've had over the years. This is their way to fund them. They're going to take money away from the police department at the risk of the public and the citizenry. And they really don't care if you become victim during this process, because when you start calling for help that you need public safety back, they're just going to increase your taxes and fund that while they took that money and funded all the other little special projects they've had in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, listen, I tell you what, let's end on a good note, Rob, since we're talking about some, crummy stuff going on in New York City. There's an event coming up next Thursday. We Back Blue, Thursday, July the 9th, 1 to 4 p.m. in central New Jersey. What can you tell us about this?
Yeah, this is a great event. It's a national movement. They had a event like this down in Maryland, where former Director of ICE Tom Homan was a speaker at. I've been asked to speak at this event. This is a grassroots effort of the silent majority in America that have had enough and are going to remain silent no more, to show their support to law enforcement. This is an event, and they're not giving the specific location out till 24 hours prior to the event to prevent counter protests or them trying to shut down the venue or such, like they've been known to do. It's going to be a great event. I'm told there's going to be a couple hundred to a couple thousand people. Ronald Brooks is singing the national anthem, and if I implore anyone to do a little research on Ron Brooks, a singer from New Jersey who had his legs amputated as a child, became a star wrestler in high school, and became the first double amputee Eagle Scout in the nation's history.
Wow.
So it's going to be a great event to support law enforcement. It's to bring the community and patriotism and unity back to our communities. And it's a shame we have to do it in such a manner where it has to be quiet. It just can't be right out in the open. And you have to take these precautions because, regardless of who you are, regardless of your background, regardless of your demographic, you call 911, the police are going to risk their lives to come to you. And we have to come back to that mentality in this nation.
Rob O'Donnell, Brothers Before Others, the organization. Again, Black the Blue rally coming up next Thursday. We want to talk with you again about that, Rob, but I certainly do appreciate your time today, sir. Be well, and happy Independence Day to you.
Happy Independence Day to you and your followers.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Rob O'Donnell joined us here on Bearing Arms, Cam & Company. I appreciate Rob O'Donnell joining us. Be safe out there in New York, by the way. And, again, Mayor de Blasio, I know it's a reach, but it's not too late for you to actually recognize the Second Amendment rights of residents. It would do a lot to undo the racial disparity that the New York City gun law is causing in the criminal justice system, as well as actually respect the constitutional rights of New Yorkers. A win-win in my book. All right, let's get to today's. Actually, before we get to today's hero of the day, our armed citizen story, our recidivist report, we do have another announcement for you. President Trump with a huge announcement for his top supporters. We'll be celebrating the 2020 Republican National Convention this summer, and he wants you to enter for your chance to join him at the convention. If you win, the team will cover the flight, hotel, and give you VIP passes for yourself and a guest. All you have to do is text ENGAGE to 88022 today for your chance to meet President Trump at the convention. Again, that's ENGAGE to 88022 to enter to win this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to be President Trump's special guest at the RNC, paid for by Donald J. Trump for President Incorporated. All right, on to. Let's start with our recidivist report, and let's stay in the state of New York, shall we? We'll go upriver a little bit from New York City. This from CBS in Albany, New York, investigating the cause of a dramatic spike in gun violence in the city of Albany. Yes, it is not just New York State or New York City, by the way. We are seeing this in cities across New York State. For some reason, New York's SAFE Act, which was put into effect amid much fanfare in 2013 by Governor Andrew Cuomo, doesn't seem to be doing anything. And the mayor doesn't seem to be talking about it. And the governor doesn't seem to be talking about it. They all want to ignore the gun control laws that they put on the books just a couple of years ago, proclaiming that, again, it would make the state a safer place. It is not happening. According to CBS 6 in Albany, County Executive Dan McCoy says, look, we're going to contribute millions of dollars to reduce violence here. Sheriff Craig Apple in Albany County says he's assigning several deputies to aid city police. Mayor Kathy Sheehan says the county should work on its own issues. She specifically points to county probation. After a 17-year-old was arrested in connection to several shootings in Albany, one of them was fatal. Turns out that 17-year-old was wanted on a bench warrant for failure to appear for sentencing for a 2019 shooting that left a 3-year-old with a gunshot wound to the arm while he slept inside of a daycare. Mayor Sheehan says would really like to ask the county to focus on their part of the equation. I, for one, would like to know what happened. What was the breakdown in the supervision that was supposed to be happening of this individual that then allowed him to then murder and create mayhem in the streets of Albany? So that's the question that I have for Albany County. Now, the sheriff, Craig Apple, said, I don't think that's really fair. He said, listen, everybody was limited workforce due to COVID, but probation never stopped. They just didn't fold up their office and go home. He said, I don't want to point fingers. I'm not saying who's right and who's wrong. I'm saying this was a complete failure from the get-go, and we all need to take responsibility. Okay, that's fine. By the way, neither talked about the need for more gun control laws, which I thought was kind of interesting. Pointing fingers at the failure of the criminal justice. Look, the criminal justice system is broken in many regards. We've talked about this every day on this program. We've been watching Bearing Arms Cam & Company for almost a year now. You've seen a story every single time that I pop up on your video screen detailing problems in the criminal justice system. Yesterday it was out of Milwaukee. Guy shot a 5-year-old girl in a road rage incident, ended up with probation, right? Just slap on the wrist, sit on his merry way. So I have no doubt that there are failures in the criminal justice system there in Albany County, and there are failures in the criminal justice system in the city of Albany as well. Here's the thing. This teenager didn't show up for his sentencing. So the question to me is not just about, okay, well, why didn't he get picked up on a bench warrant? The question is, why was he out? I mean, if he was getting sentenced for shooting a kid, why wasn't he held behind bars until it came time for his sentencing? At the very worst case scenario, the judge could have said, all right, there was 62 days between the time that you were convicted or you pled guilty and you showed up for your sentence, and so we're going to credit your 3-year sentence, whatever. We'll give you 62 days credit for time served and apply that to your sentence. Why didn't that happen? That doesn't seem to be the fault of the Albany County Sheriff's Office, nor does it seem to be the fault of the Albany County Mayor. Now you got to talk to the prosecutor. Now you got to talk to the DA and to the judge and figure out, okay, why was this teenager allowed out and then told, we'll just come back when we sentence you for shooting this kid? Because that doesn't make any sense at all. And yet I'm guessing that that's happening on a fairly regular basis. Then we get into the bail reform laws in New York State, which amount to, again, a catch and release system for many individuals who are arrested, even for violent crimes. They're allowed to walk out without posting any bail. In the vast majority of circumstances, it is a incredibly high bar for prosecutors to show that someone is a threat to the community, a danger to themselves or others, or a flight risk. So most of the time, even if you get arrested for a violent crime, you're put right back out on the streets. And again, told, basically just on the honor system, show up in court, or things potentially, hypothetically could get worse for you, but maybe not. Anyway, there's the latest out of Albany County. A lot of finger pointing, not a lot of problem solving there. Our armed citizen story of the day from Dallas, Texas, where a man shot and killed an alleged carjacker in the Dallas Metroplex. According to CBS 11 in Dallas-Fort Worth, police said they responded to a shooting at William Blair Park around 10:20 Saturday night. When they got there, 51-year-old Mark Piper told them that he was standing outside his vehicle when an unidentified man pointed a gun at him and got into his car. Piper said he then drew his own firearm and shot the alleged suspect, killing him. After interviewing Piper and other witnesses in the area, police said the case will be referred to the Dallas County Grand Jury. Right now, this looks like a clear-cut case of self-defense, but we'll search for any more details and give you any updates as they become available. Now, I got to tell you, over the past, let's say, month or so, as things have really started to go sideways across this country in terms of protests and the unrest and the riot and the rise of violent crime and the COVID cases, I have not had any trouble finding our recidivist report stories. They're still there. Even when the courts were largely closed, I can still find these cases. I've not had any trouble finding armed citizen stories like the one we just talked about in Dallas, Texas. Where I've had trouble over the past few weeks is finding my good deed of the day. That's been a real struggle. I don't know if we're just, deciding to act more like jerks to one another, and so these good news stories aren't popping up quite as frequently, or maybe the media's decided, chaos sells way better than good news. But it has become a little bit of a chore to try to find these stories. Now, I did find one, a good one today from St. Joseph, Missouri, where a good Samaritan in the right place at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing, helped to save the life of another. Brandon Busby is his name. He showed up at a gas station in St. Joseph last week, not for any special reason, I guess just to get gas, maybe run in and grab a soda or something like that. And he ran across a gunshot victim, a bullet wound in his leg, losing a lot of blood. He said, I heard a few people screaming that a man had been shot, and without even thinking, I went over and I asked him where he got shot, and he pulled up his shorts, and I saw the wound. Brandon Busby is a military veteran, does have some combat medic experience during his time with the U.S. Army. He said, I grabbed my belt, I used it as a tourniquet. Another gentleman next to me gave me his belt. I jumped to the other side, put that one on his leg. Busby said, police officers arrived about 10 minutes later. 10 minutes later. Yeah, I just had to repeat that. But he said it felt like 2 minutes. He said it didn't matter who the man was. All he was thinking in the moment was that somebody needed help. He said, I still don't know his name. He said, I know nothing about him. There aren't all bad people in St. Joe. And he said he wants people in the community to help the people around him. He said, if we were to stick together and we were to look out for our neighbor, maybe things would change. He also said he has one more message for the victim. He said, if you see this man, I hope that you're making it all right. Busby said he now carries around absorbent plugs for bullet wounds if he ever runs into the situation again. He said there were 2 other people tending to the man when he arrived and had placed one tourniquet on with a T-shirt. He suggested using a belt or something tighter if there are no other options around. I got to say, man, I hope that Brandon Busby does get a chance to meet that individual whose life he saved And that is very, very good advice for each and every community. I know it's difficult when there are just so many. I'm really trying to be family friendly because I know we got little kids watching, but so many people who just seem to inspire us to be at our worst. If we can try to tune them out, we can try instead to be at our best, to love thy neighbor. We actually can make this community and this country a better place. I know it's sappy, but it's true. All right, that is going to do it for this edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. I want to thank you for being a part of the program today. Coming up tomorrow, July the 1st, new gun laws going into effect in the state of Virginia. We're going to talk with Culpeper County Sheriff Scott Jenkins about that and more. We will see you then. Until then, however, be safe, be well, be free. And we'll talk to you soon with another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company.